Finch, it was great to see you in DC at the Council for Economic Resilience event a few weeks ago. Thank you so much for coming. And we were honored to have your former boss there, Secretary Chow. And since you were last on the podcast, we had an election. You and I spoke about it. What could be, what could not be. Now President Trump's sworn in. He's there. He's talking to the media. He's firing away, signing executive orders. What impact do you see President Trump in this term having on autonomy?
Well, he was very supportive of innovation and autonomy as a whole in his first administration. Of course, one of the key documents we put out was our AV 4.0, ensuring American leadership in automated vehicle technology. It was a whole government approach. We see some leaders returning. Some that are known are like Michael Kratsios and Lynn Corker over at the Office of Science and Technology Policy. So strong leadership there. We're seeing lots of people tapped that have strong innovation leanings and people that understand how innovation can lead to higher safety outcomes. Certainly, Secretary Duffy has said all the right things, and he's shown a great interest in pushing forth with the use of autonomy. And then if we get some of our old champions back in, like Steve Bradbury for the deputy secretary, should he be confirmed, we would see a lot of strong leanings towards autonomy and the greater use of autonomy. I do think one thing that'll be interesting is, you know, after the election, we saw President Trump lean in on the West Coast port automation issues. And so and he leaned in on behalf of organized labor. And so I think we're going to see that industry needs to be thoughtful about ensuring that you understand what organized labor's needs are, but don't let some of the more outlandish demands take over the conversation. You can show that you care about the blue collar worker without giving up everything that the technology can do. I think that you have to be mindful about the approach. It is not just a slam dunk, but I do think if you include the right people and you make the right considerations, you can push forward so that we can finally get some permanence in some of the rulemakings and some of the regulations and rules of the road for autonomous vehicles of every kind.
For the record, I think the pick of Secretary Duffy as Secretary of Transportation was a brilliant pick. I fully expect Secretary Duffy to move the department forward and do a really good job. And we're seeing how he's handled this unfortunate tragedy that happened in Washington. Secretary Duffy is assertive. He's on the point and is extremely well articulate how he's delivering that message. With AB 4.0, you highlighted the key: American leadership. We're seeing now the rise of DeepSeek. We had a report in the Financial Times today that China's building a war fallout bunker for nuclear war. They're gearing up ships in the Taiwan Strait. We have export controls on ships, but yet they're still getting them. How does America hold the leadership mantle on autonomy when you have this rising threat coming out of China that we're starting to see in autonomy? And Secretary of Treasury came out during his confirmation here and said China's trying to export their way out of recession, and he even used the word depression. My big ask is, at some point, they're going to export autonomy just like they're trying to do export AI. How do we get ahead of that and ensure American leadership?
So, obviously, as we think about this, China, whether or not they actually ripped off some of our systems to create theirs, certainly we've seen time and again that they let our leaders innovate and then they copy. Now, we shouldn't take for granted that they will always do that, because certainly we've seen in the electric vehicle field great leaps and bounds where their technology has now beaten ours, or for the time being seems to be outperforming ours. Greatly subsidized, but still. So, when it comes to automation as a whole, especially for automated vehicles, American industry needs certainty. I don't think that we're going to get national champions the way China does it with heavy subsidies, in their approach to try and dominate certain key components of the innovation economy. We've seen that play out for, battery technologies and electric vehicles. We've seen it play out with things like aerial drones, and other technologies. We can't let this be an area where we lose the lead that we have because we fail to set the rules and provide certainty to innovators to be able to deploy, which then gives certainty to investors to be able to have money flow back into these technologies once again. Sort of the same way we saw under the first Trump administration. We saw tens of billions of dollars flow into these technologies because people saw there was going to be a road for deployment. And then the investments have withered for the past 4 years. Again, having gone to a startup, then ran out of money, we couldn't raise. It was a much tougher environment for a number of reasons. Obviously, you can't just blame politics, but if we can provide certainty to the innovators, then they can compete. They can compete on safety in the right ways. They can compete on technological innovation. If we keep futzing around and China has that, one mind mentality, whole of government approach, they can beat us in this technology because there's no dissenting voices. It's just the voice of the government telling everybody exactly what to do, and they will carry it out. So it is an international and a global competition, and it is one that we are at risk of losing our lead in if we can't provide a path forward for our innovators.
We need the path forward. The investors I speak to, there's billions of dollars on the sidelines ready to invest in autonomy into the sector, but they will not do it until there's regulatory certainty. They want to see a federal framework. They don't want this whack-a-mole. I believe now we're up to 15 driver-in bills across the United States, and that's a huge risk to their business, and they're not going to invest until there's certainty. And to me, I'm looking at this. So we have David Sachs as an AI and crypto czar. Do we need an autonomy czar? Because China is starting to export. They're championing Pony AI. They're championing WeRide. The vehicles are now showing up in Europe, on the European continent. It's closer.
I'll say, I mean, I don't know that he would give himself this title, but I hope Michael Kratsios gets confirmed, and I would just put the title of Automation Czar on here. He's got a lot of experience with automated vehicles, with drones, and with all of the advanced technologies when he spent his time as Undersecretary of Technology, Research and Development at the Department of Defense. That's what he did after his time as the Deputy of the Office of Science and Technology Policy at the White House. Then he went to Scale AI, I believe, after that. So he's got some deep experience in this field. So if we want to just give the title to somebody, I mean, I don't know if you're thinking about recruiting somebody else into the White House to do it as well, but I think Michael Kratsios is as good as it gets in that area.
What position or role is he going for?
He's nominated to be the head of the Office of Science and Technology Policy.
Perfect. That's
Yeah.
where you want this to live. Perfect. We wish him the best. We hope and pray he can get through confirmation because you have an individual with deep experience that understands this threat. But I still have this threat, and I look at this. What role does Secretary Rubio going to play in this? Because he has some very stern comments that he made during his confirmation hearing where he goes, that one day we can wake up and China's controlling our media. So he seems like he is well averse at state to the risks that are posed across the board.
Yeah, well, it's no secret. I mean, again, our intelligence agencies have testified before Congress about the amount of intellectual property that has been flat out stolen by the Chinese, the infiltration into our networks, in our power grids. You see even recent news about some of our critical infrastructures. Chinese are finding ways to put in trap doors so they can come back in. They could potentially, if necessary, in a time of war, take control, shut down some of our key systems, put a lot of hurt on American civilians. They have infiltrated our networks and they pose a direct threat now, should they choose to exercise it. So it is scary times, right? I mean, my hope is that we have the same pressures we put on them. It's just they haven't found them yet, right? That's an idle hope, but hopefully we're not just sitting here on the receiving end of this. And certainly it's good that we know it's there, but our systems are so decentralized with so many different authorities responsible for maintenance and upkeep of them that there's just vulnerabilities all over the place. So it is worrisome. So everything we talk about in terms of, just specifically automated vehicles, or even some of the rulemakings around connected vehicles, they're all in the context of this pervasive decades-long effort of the Chinese government to get into our systems, to steal our weapon systems, to steal our intellectual property, to have an ability to impact our economy as a whole, and to put pressure on us should we ever, get into an armed conflict with them. They've been positioning themselves for decades. So we can get along with them, we can trade with them, we can be good partners with them. It doesn't mean that everything's going to go bad. And certainly from their point of view, you get why they would want to have safeguards against the American superpower. But that doesn't mean it's not worrying and concerning. And that doesn't mean that we shouldn't be circumspect about all of our actions with regard to their ability to inflict pain on us. I mean, that's not really something that allies do, right? You don't see France and the UK putting the same pressures on us. So that's not how friends treat each other. So we have to be circumspect in all of these areas, even if we compete with them in the free market, as we do in our friends in Europe. we can't lose sight of the fact that they consider us a threat and they're positioning themselves to be able to act against us if necessary.
They are threatened. There's Pew data that's been released recently that the American public overwhelmingly views China as one of the biggest threats to American democracy. And you look at vulnerabilities, you look at threats at the Taiwan Strait. If China goes into Taiwan, the global semiconductor comes to a screeching halt. The company that's going to be affected the most is the company that's driving this economy right now is NVIDIA. And they play such a significant role in autonomy as well. How does the U.S., what policy we put in place to hedge this risk? Because this is a major risk. I know, well, I'll get feedback and pushback for you. Oh, the foundries are coming in Ohio. Well, those aren't coming anymore. You have foundries coming in Arizona. Those are still online. But there's, to me, the choke point is so obvious and so visible. What policies can be put in place?
I mean, that's a really good question. And I tell you what gets me too is as we think about this, if you've seen some of the news articles about the advancements in asymmetric underwater warfare with underwater drones, if we talk about our U.S. Navy, which is, of course, envy of the world, they keep the trade lanes open for literally everybody in the world. We have to be everywhere all the time to keep the free flow of trade. Very underappreciated by our global partners. But when you have new sorts of threats like you've seen developed in Russia and Ukraine, with that ongoing conflict, you see those and the risk they would pose to our armed services and our military forces as a whole, then you start to open up new worries about our ability to project power. I mean, it's different if you're talking about defending the homeland, but our ability to project power to protect our allies, that becomes very worrisome. So in terms of policies, it can't be military only, obviously, because the Chinese are looking at ways to use this asymmetric warfare tactics to be able to defeat our overwhelming superior military technology right now and just the number of ships and planes. So, I mean, ultimately, as we look to try and make sure that we're not completely reliant on Chinese technologies for things like our own military equipment, our missiles, our ships, which right now we are reliant on China for some of our key weapons, we have to be able to disentangle this, but still keep enough of a good trade relationship with China so that they would forever find it not in their best interest to go to war with us. So it doesn't mean bowing to them at all, but it does mean, we want them to buy our things and we want our innovators to have access to some of the Chinese products that are valuable.
There's a lot of things. What happens with tariffs? Trump's obviously going to put tariffs on China. How are they going to retaliate?
I don't know. And honestly, where we stand right now, today is January 31st. I think we're going to learn a lot more about the president's approach to tariffs tomorrow, right? It sounds like we've gotten higher numbers. I think it's 25% for Canada and Mexico starting now. And you wonder, the saying I've heard is, don't literally take him seriously. Well, I mean, I think they're taking him seriously. I don't know what sort of negotiation tactic this is, or if this is a starting point, but it is gonna, this will sort of be a trial run for what we see with China. There's I'm not going to be able to predict what exactly is going to happen there, but as they say, may you live in interesting times. Ancient curse.
There's no doubt about the interesting times. And if you talk about sophistication of China, so they ByteDance, they launch TikTok here in America. China's getting all this data insight into American culture, especially younger individuals, for better or worse, are highly, highly impressionable. Then they launched DeepSeek, and I'm not buying the way that this was rolled out, just for the record here. And then they're getting all of our data about what we're thinking. You're just empowering the enemy. It's like, oh, here's the battle plan, sir. Yeah, why is nobody waking up and realizing this? Yes, I understand the technical, the quote unquote breakthrough, but it just seems that if you turn on CNBC or you turn on Bloomberg, it's just Palmer Luckey said this, by the way, and I agree with Mr. Luckey, that all they're doing is out there touting Chinese propaganda about how far they are ahead of us. Why does somebody wake up, especially from a policy standpoint? You're based in DC and you're one of the smartest policy people I've ever met. When does somebody wake up and say, wait a second, you're just empowering the enemy?
Well, I will say it has only been 1 week, and I've already seen Congress ban the use of DeepSeek from any congressional tool, iPhone or whatever. Certainly, military's followed on. I believe DoD has also issued it. And just as a whole, I think it's brand new, so it's not like it's got a lot of downloads anyway. People are interested in it, but from a user perspective, I don't have it, but I've messed with lots of the other tools. I think there's anything right away that would lead to widespread adoption beyond what people are already using with any of the consumer facing products. And in terms of anything that would be on a more commercial base, I don't know that there's many American companies that, at least right now, are thinking it's a good idea. Certainly, there's questions about whether or not it'll be banned. Obviously, if it really was just 3% of the cost to develop it, well, because they copied it, but even in terms of how they have to sell the product, that changes things dramatically. And honestly, I know this is a little bit of a side note. I'm curious as to how much it's going to change some of the planned investments on some of the data centers and the like that we've heard about. Because if they found a better way to do it, I mean, who's to say that Anthropic or ChatGPT or somebody won't just say, okay, well, we can mimic that too, and then figure out a way to make theirs a fraction of the cost. So I think you've seen a lot of companies, obviously OpenAI is different, but a lot of companies are responding with the, oh, neat, it's advancing things further because they know they can just do exactly what the DeepSeek team did, copy it back, and then figure out how to make it dramatically cheaper. Because, some of the numbers we were seeing about the investments required to keep these systems going further, they were just bonkers. I mean, they were not sustainable, is what I should say. And so I think there's a hope that there were some real breakouts to figure out how to recoup this money. And certainly, if you're some of the companies that have already invested billions in it, you are concerned about the sunk cost of your previously made investments. But if you're a new, especially American startup, and you're like, oh, I can just mimic that too. It's early days, so it is a highly competitive market, and first movers aren't always the winners. A lot of other companies can leapfrog those costs, come in and just benefit from the lessons learned. But we'll see. There's a lot to be determined, but this is not the end of the story.
No, it's merely just beginning. I've played with DeepSeek, but I played with it on Perplexity with the data's hosted in America, and that's getting sensitive. And I have to say, I wasn't impressed. The OpenAI model, much better. And if the reports are true, we don't have enough evidence yet, but the reports say that a lot of it was stolen. But what it really did more than anything, it showed the power of open source, and that's where you have the new Meta Llama 4 model coming with open source. The money is not going to be made on building the LLMs. The money's going to be made on what's building on top of it. And we got some insight into what you asked about for the spending on the Blackstone earnings. COO John Gray came out and said, no, we're full steam ahead. We're still seeing the demand. Mr. Zuckerberg on the Meta earnings, so that they're going to continue their investment. So the investment is going to continue. I don't necessarily buy that the way that they trained it uses so many less GPUs. I think we do have a major breakthrough coming if and when Google can get that Willow chip commercialized. Then okay, whoa, look at what this chip's doing. So there's going to be chip breakthroughs. I don't necessarily think that the models of the way they describe it are necessarily going to be breakthroughs. But this all comes back to policy, and we're very fortunate. We have a young, if one of the youngest in history, vice presidents that's extremely tech savvy, former venture capitalist, and Vice President Vance. What role is he going to play shaping this technology policy?
Well, it's going to be interesting because as we see more of the commercial applications of this technology come into place, it's also going to impact how the FTC takes a look at exits, right? So you build something because maybe you want to own this product and commercialize it and run this company your entire lives. Or maybe you want to do it for 5 years or so, get it stood up, get it going, and then you'd like to move on. So you should be allowed to sell the thing you've created. That's part of the American economy. I mean, that's a feature, not a bug. And so as we look at the different, I'm sure you saw OpenAI is now working with our nuclear labs, providing tools for their own researchers and investigators and just employees of all kinds to be able to use it to query things, ask questions, think through things. Certainly you have to back it up with humans, but there's nothing better than if it's 5 a.m. and you just have a really dumb question or thought, being able to just ping the system and have it feed it back to you. You also look at it, so that's a good business to government application. There's all sorts of business to business applications that make a lot of sense. And one of the applications that is business to consumer, when you talk about having a system that is a little cheaper, that is closed system, so it doesn't need to pull in all of this extra outside information, you talk about something that can go in dashboard of your car or just part of your car's infotainment system. I had a situation where my car, the back rear tire started making grinding sounds and it started driving differently. And I used Claude's Anthropic to quiz it as to like, hey, my car's doing this. What could be happening? What are the most likely things? And it said, no, here's the 5 most likely things. I said, okay, how much would that cost to fix it? And we don't really know, but here's ballpark. And I said, all right, if I take this to a shop, what are they going to sell me on? What is needed? And what do I need to watch out for? Like, what could they be upselling me on? So I know to be mindful and to be cautious about that. And it gave me these things. When I took it into the shop, it was the top two. It was two booths. It's the top 2 out of 5 things that it told me. And then I knew that they didn't try and sell me on any of the things I need to be mindful of. And I also sounded much more informed when I talked to them. It's like, I don't know if this is what it is, but I think it may be this. And then it made me a lot more comfortable going into that interaction because I don't know that much about cars, but I was a lot better informed. I was a lot more comfortable. It was not safety based. It was not life or death, but me as a consumer, it dramatically made my life better. So I did that on my phone, but why couldn't that just be in my car? And then I can do everything from telling it to play Party in the USA to asking it, the weather, to then asking questions about the car. Why is it doing this funny thing? I mean, that is a Knight Rider application, but that's something that I would expect to see at CES next year. Why is it not in our cars? It's the same tool, same system. So
I had a car, or I had a prototype version of ChatGPT built into the car. Worked horribly. But yes, I truly believe that's coming to the car. And then I believe the next thing that's going to come to the car is the augmented reality where the screen's going to become augmented. You're going to have experiences. And when you remove the steering wheel, at some point, Diageo or one of these big distributors is going to put alcohol in the car. When we put alcohol in the car, in an autonomous vehicle with no steering wheel, is the open container laws going to have to change, or where do you see that going?
I mean, that's very interesting because, yeah, I don't know. I tell you what is interesting though, that obviously asks the questions, how will they be able to tell if somebody throws up in the car? And I mean, that's an issue they face today, right? Like if you're picking up a robo taxi somewhere, how will they know if the person before you, was smoking a cigarette or threw up or like, any of the gross things that humans can do? They have to have systems for that. I know they do, but it still, eh, you know, raises the question. You would think they would be allowed to because, especially if you're, well, I guess I won't opine because I don't know, but you think over time they may be able to update the laws to allow for that. In certain areas, you'd assume like Las Vegas would seek to allow it, but it's a really interesting question that I hadn't thought about.
I think about the weird things, and the best source of thinking about things that you would never think of, talk to police officers. They think of stuff that nobody would ever think of. And I said, "Sir, why did you think of that?" "Well, we've seen it happen." Like, well, okay,
It's like the old saying, if you ever see a warning sign, it's not because somebody just thought of it, it's because somebody's already made that mistake.
exactly. We saw it with McDonald's coffee. That's why costing the coffee's hot. Do you see Vice President Vance getting involved in the nitty gritty of working with Secretary Duffy on autonomy policy, or will the Vice President focus on larger economic issues from a policy perspective?
I have not necessarily seen anything in Vance's past that made me think that he would dive into autonomous vehicles specifically, his time in the Senate or anything like that. Maybe I missed it. So I don't necessarily think he's going to jump into that, but certainly the vice president typically picks few areas where they want to focus on. Mike Pence was National Space Counselor, and he worked a lot with Department of Transportation on space launch and reentry. So JD Vance could choose to do something along those lines. Certainly, I would welcome it. It would be great for the industry as a whole. But I guess we'll see where he decides to spend his time. You'd think it's going to be rail safety policy as well, just because that would be consistent with this previous time. But we will see.
We'll see. What we do know, there is a champion in the White House. He's widely reported he has an office in the Eisenhower building, Mr. Elon Musk. Will we see Mr. Musk potentially push for a national autonomous vehicle framework, or push for policies that encourage that?
We've already, I mean, I believe he's already called for an AV safety framework. And I can't help but bring up that Secretary Chao introduced an AV safety framework, advanced notice of proposed rulemaking towards the end of our time the first time around. So I think that they're going to pick that up, brush it off. I would think that they would put a greater focus on a safety case approach because that's where industry is consolidated around. That was discussed in the ANPRM, among other issues or among other approaches. They sort of said, like, this way, that way. Let us know how you feel about this. But since then, the industry has consolidated around a safety case approach, which is you make the case for how you can deploy safety, you make your claims, show the evidence for why you think that, make sure that it all adds up together and that you can prove the safety of any operation of that vehicle. You can set that up with an engineering and process based framework, safety management system framework. And some of that is as simple as like, do you have a person in charge of safety? Do they have veto rights over operations? Can they weigh in and make sure that safety is prioritized? I mean, some of these sound simple. And then, do you have a process for X? Okay, how do you show that? What's the evidence? Do you have a process for Y? On and on and on. Continuous learning, making sure that all of this is improved and that you can learn from safety incidents. That can be baked in. And then you can look at different based federal motor vehicle safety standards if you would like to build from there. So that way you can make sure that you are specific enough to give certainty, but also it would help give help assure state legislators so that states and cities don't go in and try and regulate in that space because they see the federal government acting in that space. Because if you assume best intentions from our state and local partners, you assume that they just feel the need to regulate because they don't see the Department of Transportation regulating, which is funny because under Secretary Chow, they were moving forward with it and then nothing happened. And so you started seeing the state bills popping up in these last 4 years, at much greater numbers because the federal government wasn't moving. So those concerns started percolating. And if you assume that people just want to do right by their constituents, they felt the need to act. So if they see the federal government acting and they know they can weigh in, leave comments, have meetings, maybe be part of working groups, I don't know. But if they can be included in that and they can tell their constituents, I'm working on this, I'm going to make sure that we're heard, and they do right by their constituents while still letting the federal government use its authorities in its rightful place to address, the real concerns people have about this new technology. So that's the way it ought to happen.
You're right. If we do get a framework, do you think you'll include tracks weighing over gross weight of 10,001 pounds?
Yeah, well, I mean, DOT, I don't see why they would limit themselves. With the House, they have committees of jurisdiction with energy and commerce being able to handle vehicles under 10,000 pounds and House transportation and infrastructure handling vehicles over 10,000 pounds. So the main reason why I think we've seen a schism in Congress is just because committees of jurisdiction. So sort of like a silly bureaucratic reason. But certainly, some people do want to allow light duty vehicles and prohibit trucks. That's the Teamsters approach, right? So we have to be mindful of all of this. Certainly, it impacts the world you move forward. But if you're talking about a NHTSA AV safety framework and safety case-based approach, that should be for all vehicles. There's never been any serious discussion about splitting that off out of the way.
Big of a risk is Sean O'Brien and the Teamsters to making a regulatory framework that gives investors certainty. How big of a risk is Mr. O'Brien and the Teamsters?
So, one, I'm fortunate to have worked for Secretary Chow, who's former Secretary of Labor. Her thing was always you treat them with the utmost respect. The Teamsters and organized labor have done a lot for the American worker. You will respect that history. You're going to treat them right because you will not always agree with them and we're not always going to do what they want. But I want you to do your best to work with them. But we did. We had good relationships with the Teamsters. We should take that approach again. Sean O'Brien has such an impact because the Teamsters voted, the rank and file blue collar Teamsters voted for President Trump. And the whole reason Joe Biden was so pro labor is because when President Trump was voting against Hillary Clinton, he had shifted the blue collar worker dramatically and organized labor rank and file votes dramatically away from Hillary Clinton in a way that the Democratic Party had never seen before in recent history, and it scared them. So then Biden had to be the most pro-labor president of all time. And that didn't work because Donald Trump still got the rank and file, blue-collar, organized labor voters, the Teamsters, supported him more than Kamala Harris. So he's not going to be lost on that. I mean, there's a lot of populism that has gone into how we got where we are today. I mean, we saw, CEOs of major companies unable to get meetings with Republican leadership. Sean O'Brien's over here speaking at the RNC. So we've got to respect that. We got to respect that voice. But if you take a look at what the Teamsters have requested in public comments and everything, we can do most of them. Like, they want new updated guidance. They want to make sure that impacts to workers are evaluated and better understood. They want to make sure they understand the role of labor in the future. They want to know, what skills do they need to be training for? What are the roles that are going to be created and how do they get ready for them? They want to make sure that their current members aren't going to be impacted. Now, you and I know we've seen studies that show that they won't be, but that means we should be willing to engage on these questions. And the Teamsters are they're not a unified entity. And so we need to engage with the different regional offices of the Teamsters to make sure they understand the potential benefits to them of these technologies. I mean, they will augment the workforce. There's not enough of these jobs. There's not enough of these trucks to go around to take any job from any driver today, and it can change the role of the driver tomorrow. You know, there's a lot of benefits that can come from this, but if we don't make it just a uniform, old organized labor thinks that AVs are bad, then we're much better off. If we can engage with them to make sure that all of the Teamsters regional committees don't necessarily see it as bad, that's a win. We have to engage with them, not ignore them. Because I think that, certainly you want to respect the role of the worker going forward and make sure they understand how these technologies can benefit them. Because what we've seen, and you and I have talked about this before, when they talked about containerization and port automation, there's more jobs now, there's better jobs now, there's safer jobs now, better quality of life. So what were you fighting for? And what are we going to be fighting for in the future? Not the trucking job of the past that's gotten significantly worse in their minds since the 80s. It is not what it used to be. So what are you fighting to save? Are you going to fight to save something that you hate in the first place? Or are you going to work together to build something that's better for you in the future? So by engaging with them, we can figure out what works. Can't give in to every demand like there has to be a human driver in every truck. That's not how autonomous trucking works. You also can't promise jobs that aren't yours to promise. If you own an autonomous trucking company, you can't promise warehouse jobs because those aren't your warehouses, So there has to be a logical understanding of who they are dealing with. They got to meet us halfway on this, but industry does to talk to them and figure out how to meet their legitimate needs and their legitimate demands. Because if you're talking about like remote operators for AVs should meet the same qualifications and safety standards as human drivers. Hell yeah. We have zero problems with that. That is true. If you're going to be operating a vehicle, yeah, you got to pass your drug test. You got to be limited on your hours of service. Yeah, all of that makes sense. You look at these, I won't read them all, but like the couple dozen, 20 or so that I've got that I'm looking at, most of them are like, yeah, no, I get that. That's fine. So if the industry can get that message across, you can mollify them. We're not going to get the Teamsters like, oh yeah, we changed our mind, 100% autonomous trucks into the future. But if you can engage with the actual Teamsters, then you can start making it so that Sean O'Brien doesn't feel 100% force behind him to try and kill the autonomous truck in the future.
We have to engage. We have to be respectful, and we also have to keep an eye on the future. And Mr. O'Brien and the Teamsters, I'd welcome Mr. O'Brien on this podcast to have an honest conversation about autonomous trucking and the positive impact that it will have on labor and the positive impact it will have on the U.S. economy. Because when the U.S. economy thrives, Mr. O'Brien, your members thrive. Your pension does better, sir. Everybody wins. Outside of the risk with Mr. O'Brien and the Teamsters, are there other political landmines as it relates to getting a national framework that you're aware of or that could bubble up in the future?
The Owner Operator Independent Drivers of America, OIDA, they have long opposed technology as well. Different issues, but the same gist. They're just worried about what this could mean for their jobs in the future. As essentially your small trucking companies, like, well, we're not going to be able to afford autonomous trucks. So will they drive us out of business? And again, I understand why you would have that concern in the long run, but there's not going to be a chance for that. You can't crank out if everybody was trying to buy every truck coming off the line and they turned every line into just autonomous truck making units. It would take decades. Like there's not enough. You can't put enough trucks out there to make a big enough dent to cost anybody their job, especially with freight demand increasing. I mean, it's bananas. But I get why the gut reaction would be, oh no, we hate this. We want to fight this. But it's not an existential threat to the American driver. It's not. And fundamentally, they can choose different sort of driving roles over time. But if you want to be a long-haul driver as it exists today, 20 years from now, yeah, you're going to be able to do that. You can still choose that job. Like, I have no doubt. 30 years from now, I have no doubt. Like, there will always be a need for the human driver to be able to take on some of these roles, but you don't have to do the worst ones. You don't have to do the backbreaking ones, the most dangerous ones, the ones that, keep you dozens of days away from home at a time with decentralized pickup and drop offs, with all the inefficiencies of the market, with you having to eat cost left and right because you're stuck waiting at a warehouse and you're not making money if the wheels ain't turning. If the wheels ain't turning, you ain't earning, is what I meant to say. So, we can use this technology to drive out the inefficiencies that have been driving the American trucker into despair for decades now. So we can use these technologies to fix that. The autonomous truck is just one part of it. I think if we do that, then they see a brighter future for their members as well. But with them, you also have to engage directly with them.
We have to engage, and if you look at the individuals that are truck drivers that long haul over the road, the diabetes, the health issues, it's very sad, and that's the best part to automate. But that last mile, God bless, come on, Teamsters, come on, we'd love to host you, we'd love to. And they can go home at night. They can see their children. They can go to the baseball game. They can go to their church. They can engage with their community. That's powerful. Then they invest in that community. Perhaps they open a diner or an ice cream bar. A lot of stuff is going to happen, but we have to engage in the framework. On the engagement standpoint, does the autonomous vehicle and truck industry have a deep enough talent bench that understands this engagement and that has the relationships with the Trump administration, or is this all roads lead to Finch Fulton?
No, no, no. Obviously, there was one person complained at the end of the Trump administration that everybody was hiring Trump people. And so that's making the industry look Trumpy as a whole. Now, there's been a lot of turnover anyway. So that's, I think, no longer a leading concern. But I think because there's been a lot of engagement, I don't think there's going to be difficulty having the issues be heard with the current administration. Certainly I can help it. I'm not the only one. But we have to give people that are willing to hear us out on this every tool they need to succeed. And that means not just leaving it up to them, right? You got to give them the data they need to move forward with rulemakings, the engagements they need. You've got to talk to everybody else at the Department of Labor, at the White House. You have to be engaging on all areas so that if they do send something up, the people that see it already understand what it is and why. And then you have to engage the people that have spoken out against it to, again, you don't have to change their minds, but you have to be able to say, we've talked with them, we understand their concerns. Here's how we've addressed 85% of them. We're not going to be able to address these for these reasons. We've heard them. We've taken action on it. We're ready to move forward. And we think that if you move forward, you will have done your due diligence to make sure that you're doing right by all the parties. And not everybody gets everything they want, but so we have to do that to make their lives easier because they got a lot going on. It is difficult to be sitting in those government seats. So everything we can do to make it easier for them to say yes, that is on us to do.
It is on us to do, and we have to find compromises for the benefit of the American public and the American economy. Finch, what do we need to look for in the policy realm as it relates to autonomous trucks and autonomous vehicles over the next 18 months?
Well, for autonomous trucks, one, the exemption petition that was denied and now is being challenged in court, it's just bananas to me. They said there wasn't enough data to be able to justify this. But you can always ask for more data as part of an exemption petition being granted, and fine. But if you flip the question and you said there's warning markers on the front of trucks now to showcase when the vehicle stopped on the side of the road, but we would like you to do a cost-benefit analysis on making the human driver get out of the vehicle, put their body in harm's way to put out a warning marker. And it's got to be even further if you're in a blind spot. So a hill or curve, you have to go put your body in the exact area of danger. Doesn't matter if it's rainy, doesn't matter if it's dusk. You take your human body and you throw that thing out there instead of using lights and technology to signal where the truck is. Go do that cost benefit analysis and tell me if it justifies having these truck drivers put their human body in harm's way. No, it doesn't. So you're going to deny it on that? Just because we're doing something stupid now doesn't mean we have to keep doing it. So I'm hoping that we can come to some quick resolution. We can always gather more data. One of the things I think they should gather is just how many fatalities, incidents, injuries happen because drivers have to get out of their vehicles every year. I think they should do, it's not easy because you have to go through police reports one at a time, trying to figure out what's been miscategorized if we had a new category for this. So it's not a quick and easy, but it is a safety issue. So I'd like to know just how big it is. And then, of course, if you're talking about certainty, you want to take some of the interpretations that have been made over time, even, AV 3.0, asserting that the driver can be a human or a machine. some of the follow-on rulemakings and interpretations that came out from the occupant protection rulemaking, and then some of the applied interpretations we've seen industry utilizing. We want those locked in some of the rulemakings because then you have certainty. Just because interpretations are essentially guidance, and so if an incoming secretary or future secretary didn't like the technology, they could destroy the industry just by interpreting differently. So we want those interpretations locked in. Essentially, if you have an autonomous vehicle, it doesn't have to have the same rules. No steering wheel, no brakes, no windshield. Well, windshield, that'd be different. But if you have an autonomous level 4 vehicle, it doesn't have to have the healing controls in there. Like, we need to have that locked in by regulation so that it can't just be interpreted differently and, throw a lot of vehicles out of compliance. And then we also, of course, have the AV safety framework and the FMCSA ADS equipped commercial motor vehicle rule. Those need to be advanced. And they need to be advanced with safety prioritized and with logical, consistent approaches. And pick up where Chow left off, but we need to see forward progress on those, and the industry needs to be championing those and working together as a whole. There's no time for schisms or arguments. Let's all work together and make sure that we can advance autonomy as a whole, because now is the time to do it. We need to work with people that have opposed us. That doesn't mean we don't move forward. I think we need to do that now.
You're right. We need to come together for the benefit of the American public, the benefit of the U.S. economy, and to ensure our national security. Sometimes it takes compromises. Whatever it takes, we need to do it together, because when we get a framework, we get certainty. And get certainty, we unlock investment. When investment creates jobs, and that will start to lead to what I call the autonomy economy. The future is bright. The future is autonomous. The future is sound autonomy policy. Finch, thanks as always for coming on the road to autonomy.
Thank you for having me.